This exhibition, it really grew out of my time at Tyler, where I did went to grad school. There I had a few significant things happen to me, I feel. For one thing, I was given 2 years of just free access to material and time to make work, and you can really get a lot done then. But in my first critique, or my first semester there, I went back to something I'd been, sort of my first access to making art was making portraiture. So I did a portrait of Woody Guthrie, and I kind of put it in a room with some other sculptures, and sort of like a mixed bag of art for like my first review. And it was really actually a good idea because, it brought up some interesting ideas between what a portrait of a person might represent, compared to some object or some other sort of experience. So I sort of stuck with that, and it sort of was something I sort of tried to figure out as I developed in school. There's a bit of that element here. I've kind of picked 3 characters from history, and basically based on their relationship to ideas about color. And color was the other idea that really sort of developed for me in grad school. It wasn't just because we're here at Roy G. Biv, obviously that's a nice coincidence, and actually helped sort of make some decisions for me. But in that same review where I had the portrait and some other sculpture, the room was completely lacking color. There was no color. And one of my professors said, why aren't you using color in your work? And I had never really thought about it before. And that brought me back to actually OSU, where I did my undergrad. And I remember sitting in color theory class, and actually I had taken color theory along with beginning painting, and that's sort of the first time I painted and the last time I painted. But I remember having this really great experience of putting these ideas that I was learning to, applying them to my painting, and really understanding it, but also understanding that there was still a lot of confusion about, what color was and how it functioned, and some anecdotal stories, about Newton and Goethe kind of stuck with me. And so, when I got this comment in grad school, I kind of went back and researched these ideas about color. Really, again, still interested in sort of these more anecdotal things, not really the science or the math behind it, because even that's kind of a little, still debatable. Basically, one of the main motivating stories. I don't know how long I'm going to go on here, but I've got a lot of information, so just cut me off. But there's this, Newton was kind of the first guy to really begin to define the colors in a way that made sense for artists. So all these guys, I think, are kind of were important for an artistic understanding of color, not just some for scientific, but really all of them had some contribution to an artistic understanding. So Newton, he's the first one to kind of make a color wheel, and that piece against the back wall. There's a little bit of literature to the right, or a little bit of writing that kind of explains where I'm getting at. So Newton wanted, he was the first one to sort of, people had seen the refracted spectrum in glass before, in water. They were sort of aware of how to use a prism to get the colors. Newton was the first one to sort of really try to define that. And he came up with 7 colors, which is now debated. And the reason he wanted 7 was he had this idea, sort of based on Greek sophists, that color, the musical notes, days of the week, and the known planets in the solar system were all supposed to be the number 7, right? That everything else was 7, so colors had to be 7. So he inserted indigo in there. So that's sort of the first anecdotal little thing that caught my attention. It's this guy was really wrong and had this sort of personal belief that kind of really shaped all of our beliefs. Okay, so that's kind of the bigger idea I'm getting at here. So then, moving to Goethe. Goethe was a guy who came along, and he was really set on telling Newton that he was wrong. And even though Newton was a scientist and Goethe was a poet more than anything else, although he certainly was interested in science and a lot of things that were going on in his time. He was really the one who was the first one to realize that color was really based on our perception of color. Like, there was no definable color. It was really, there was some sort of interaction that was going on between, well, he didn't really understand the mechanics of the eye, but he knew that, the way we saw color, even the way the world, our worldview shaped our understanding of color, affected the way we saw it or defined it. A more phenomenological approach to color. So this obviously, he also was the first one to associate physiological effects of color. So say like red makes you excited, orange makes you excited, while blue is calming, and that kind of idea. That he wrote several paragraphs about each sort of tone on the color spectrum and what it meant to him or what he felt it meant to society in general. So I find that really interesting, and that's been something that I kind of make the work to get people to explore these kind of ideas or to investigate these stories and how they might not just represent the way we understand color, but how we kind of deal with information in general. We really want to objectify these things that are universally subjective, which is one of kind of a main interest of mine for this stuff, but for other things that I do. So that's kind of a little bit of the backstory. I'll mention too about Chevreul. So there's three guys, Newton, Goethe, and Chevreul. Chevreul was a French chemist who's actually best known for making soap. And actually all these guys are better known for other things that they've done in their careers than working with color, which is something that's interesting because people are interested in lots of things happen to be like, tune themselves into color. But Chevreul was the first guy who understood this idea of, now I'm going to forget the term because I don't have my notes, but simultaneous contrast, where it's like an illusion that happens when you have bands of similar tones of the same color, where it seems lighter towards a darker color and darker towards a lighter color. And this was really, this was incredibly influential for the Impressionists, the Post-Impressionists, the Orpheism, kind of when painters really started to understand how paint was interacting with each other. George Seurat's pointillism is directly based on the work of Chevreul. So that's kind of like the backstory. I'm just going to open it up to questions at this point because, if there's kind of a few different projects in here, obviously, if people have specific questions about any of them or technical questions or confused or happy to. Yeah.
Are these corks?
Yeah, those are wine corks. Yeah.
Are they part of the exhibit?
They're in the room, sure. Yeah. And part of my practice is collecting things. It was interesting hearing you talk, Nicole, talk about moving every year, because I've moved pretty much every year since I left home, and I'm a sculptor and I'm a collector of things, and so I'm very aware of kind of what I have, and it's a fight inside my brain at all times. But I collect. I basically have been collecting my recyclables, the stuff that's colored, for several years now, and this is what I do. I cut it out and I kind of separate out the colors, and so all the color in these pieces are from consumer waste, and the same for the color here. The glass color is like purchased, but then all these things kind of tend to pile up. So somebody's got a whole bunch of wine corks, I take them, and we notice with these that the red wine, you actually got a really nice fade from like very light to you know, pretty deep red. So it kind of you know, went along with the exhibition, so I decided to include it.
Are these recycled or fabricated?
Like the
Are these like found or fabricated?
well, the glass itself is fabricated. I've been blowing glass for about 10 years, and so that is my like, you know, materials
Glass.
specifics.
And these are black. You're blowing.
Those are blown glass as well, yeah. And so, you know, and I with the glass idea, I've tried to be really honest with glass and make glass do what we kind of expect it to do, or not try to force it into some form that doesn't make sense. So in this case, you know, a lens and like this kind of vessel idea, and the vessel idea, and, you know, this is kind of maybe like a vessel commodity idea or something. The holes on the back wall.
This filled with water then?
That's water, yeah. It's water. Oh yeah, well, it's kind of tough to talk over, or it's not tough to talk over. And this might be the thing that kind of is the sore thumb that sticks out a little bit. But I mean, it's not really. Actually, when the sun comes in here in the morning, it makes a really nice refracted rainbow along the back wall. This, I'm just, you know, I'm interested in that idea. Like I was saying, you know, the main difference between Newton and Goethe was this idea that Goethe said, you know, this color is about the way we see it. It's not about, you know, some physical property of the light. It's about our perception of it, and you know, and that's how I feel about what a lens does too. It you know, it alters our perception. In this case, you have an image that's flipped, it's distorted, and it's very complicated mathematics, and then this motion. You know, I'm thinking about, I guess I'm trying to refer slightly to like an idea of a moving image. You know, just making something that's kind of clunky and not, you know, this is not anything technologically interesting, or it's not technologically advanced, but I'm hoping it sort of references like this idea that we sort of look at like moving light all the time, and that's sort of its linked to a contemporary idea, I suppose. Is that confusing? Yeah, I guess, Charlie.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of the way you've presented these things, like kind of casually or something. Like there's something like irreverent about the presentation.
Yeah, sure.
And it's surprising, right? Like how a lot of the people in this room didn't know that you blow glass, you know. But there's like a bunch of really carefully blown glass.
Right, sure.
Like,
Yeah, that's a good point. Irreverence. That's certainly. I mean, that's kind of exactly what I'm practicing here by kind of like saying I know something about these people when I really don't. And I put Wikipedia over here too, which is something I've done in previous exhibitions with portraiture, and you know, and the idea is that that's really this is our history now, and it's kind of like it's the top 4 hits on Google, you know, and I think that's irreverent, but yeah, the idea of like treating the glass as casual or as like secondary. That's definitely, I might be overcompensating because I'm a very highly trained glass blower, and you want to like be recognized as something besides that or in addition to that. But I like, and Nicole hit on this too, like that idea of like subtlety. You know, I think, you know, there's a lot that kind of goes into it, but there's a lot that kind of gets taken away. There's a lot of editing that happens and simplifying. That I think is a really important step too, when you're trying to jam stuff with ideas. Like sometimes there's too many ideas. competing or something. Yeah.
What is the weight in pounds of the largest glass object you've fabricated?
Well, it's usually much lighter than you think. I don't know, I don't really know for sure. It's probably not more than like 20 pounds or something.
I understand you made a bottle. It's about this large around.
That sounds like a pretty good story. I'll take that.
What was the weight of the
This is about the biggest scale of bottle, but maybe we've done something a little bit bigger. But this is my dad. This is about as big as we can go comfortably. But this thing is filled with 12 gallons of water at 8 pounds of each. So the water alone is 100 pounds, and then the glass is probably another 10, 15. So if you count the water, that's 120 pounds.
What did that bottle?
You're a graduate.
Yeah, no, it was not much.
Oh, was it?
12, 15 pounds.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah. But, yeah, it grows in your memory, I guess. It always does. It shrinks a lot in the I guess, the thing I'll say is, this has been really interesting for me. Like I said, a lot of this work came out of what happened for me in graduate school, and this is really my first exhibition since graduating, which was in 2011. So it's been, a couple years of kind of making some of this stuff and thinking about it. And in a way, I recognize that it's hard. It's hard to keep going out of school, and I want to keep working in this vein. But I'd love, even if it's not right now while we're kind of like being videotaped or whatever. But I'd love if anybody had any feedback for me. It's been a long time since I've kind of had feedback, and in a lot of ways, I'm kind of insecure about all this stuff. So. Fire away if you want. I'd love to hear it. It could happen later.
Yeah, I was just like some observations.
Sure.
I had, when I found out that these are handmade rather than bought or fabricated industrially, completely changes my interaction with them now, especially these ground pieces. They're really slick, and so to know that that was made in the glass studio, hand blown, makes me interact with them differently. I don't know how you change that in terms of context with being reverent or irreverent to affect that. The other thing that I was wondering before, and you kind of answered that with the wine bottles, is just are there any types of rules or kind of that you set for yourself in the collecting process with all these? How does that affect the content of the work?
Sure.
Just recyclable? Is it all recyclables? Is it for a certain amount of time?
Sure.
Things like that, or just some feedback.
No, I appreciate that. The handmade element, it's always kind of a challenge. Although I do have to say that something I think about a lot is that in the process of learning this process, the more you can channel sort of your inner machine, the better it goes. It's like we're working with Rebecca right now over there, and it's with several people, and it's as much as we can all sort of do the exact same thing every time or make really small adjustments. It's that is how you get success. It's and that's why glass gets so it's so much easier, or if you're really invested in it, it's so much easier to go into a product line idea where you're making kind of a few things over and over and over again. So I'm interested in that, and I want to reference that without really doing it. So that's kind of where the bottles come from, actually, a little bit, is this idea of contrasting, this industrial idea with this handmade idea, by trying to become the glass factory or something. So I don't know, and that's something that I'm kind of struggling. Like I'm not expecting anybody to read that here, but I think it's, you know, that's something I'm trying to figure out how to point at a little bit more. And I think my use of sort of industrial packaging materials is related, but you know, I don't know if it hasn't all come quite full circle. And then the other point you made was kind of about.
Oh, I was just wondering about like the collecting process, like
Right.
if, you know, about like any rules.
Right.
Or like, and like how that could affect content.
Sure.
Rather than-
I feel like I do kind of give myself rules, but it's hard not to break them. So yeah, that's interesting, because I think I find myself responding to work like that, where there's these kind of constraints put in place, and it's just like acting out like it's almost like a scientific method to making art. It's like giving yourself like a mission and just like carrying it out. So, and you know, I think there's probably a lot of artists in this room. I think we all know that it's difficult sometimes to like stay on path. And so there are some rules. It's mostly like my trash or mine and my girlfriend's trash. And, but occasionally, like if we need an extra, you know, shade of purple, we'll go out and buy something special that we wouldn't normally. I'm happy to be done. So, thank you everybody for coming